Hello folks, this is Avi at PowerPivotPro.com. You're about to watch the recording for our webinar on June 2nd, Building BI Solutions using Power BI. You can click on the button for information on our future webinars. We typically run one every month. You can also click to watch a demo video of all the Power BI tools. Check out our other videos on our channel and don't forget to subscribe. From this screen, you can click to jump on any topic presented in this webinar. You can click on the green button at the top to go ahead and just start the webinar. Here's a list of questions that were asked. I'll step through this on 3 pages just so you can glance and get an idea. We will try to add a link in the details portion of this video, which will let you jump to a specific question. So look for that link. But for now, here's the kind of list of questions. This is page 1. Here's page 2. And here's page 3. All right, enjoy the webinar. All right. Now I know the webinar was titled How to Build BI Solutions Using Power BI. But before we talk about how, let's talk about why. Why to build BI solutions using Power BI? Well, in the past, you had 2 choices when it came to BI. So let me explain the axis here. So in the y-axis, you have the cost, right? Both in terms of actual money spent and the effort involved. And on the x-axis here is the lifetime of the project, right? So one of your 2 choices was just spreadsheets. Easy to start with, really quick, up and running, pretty agile when you get started. However, with escalating costs over time, your Excel reports over time would get extremely complicated, hard to maintain, refresh, and harder to make additional changes. And before you know it, you're living in Excel hell. Now, signs of Excel hell, some of the signs are, well, when you find yourself or your teammates scheduling their vacation around a report refresh. Like, oh gosh, no, I can't go that week. I have to do that monthly report, right? And sometimes a monthly report that takes a week or more to refresh. And last one, when a person who is maintaining a report, they happen to leave, win a lottery, hit by a bus, one of those, the report just falls apart, right? That's too much complexity. Well, what was the other option? Your next option was to go with traditional BI. Right? By that, I mean one of the big name softwares by one of the big name companies. Now these come with high upfront costs. Now you can easily spend millions of dollars, and it could take 6 months to a year for the whole project. But the promise was that once you're past all this, the maintenance costs are going to be low. Oh boy. Only if that were true, right? That would be perfect. Then we wouldn't be here talking about this. Well, the challenge was twofold. One, it's always hard to capture requirements perfectly, right? So everybody has their own interpretation. Something that's lost in translation through that project process. Happens to any project, not just BI projects. So by the end of it, end of the 6 months, the customer says, you know what, that's not what I asked for. And you say, oh, what do you mean? Here I have the requirements document. That's what it says. And you go over again and maybe do another 3-month or 6-month project and keep repeating that cycle. Gosh. Or the customer would say, great, somehow you read my mind and captured all my requirements just perfectly, but that's what I needed 6 months ago. It's not what I need now. Business changes fast these days, right? So you try your best to cope with that, but you really can't, not with these old kind of traditional BI tools. And what is the business user doing in the interim? Well, they're not sitting idle. They need their hands on BI. So they're going back to spreadsheets, and they may be pulling some data from the BI solution, but then they're pulling in a whole bunch more from whatever they really need, put it together in spreadsheets, and voila, they're up and running. But we know exactly where that road is headed, right? So that cost is going to escalate over time. And maybe in a year or two, somebody smart would come in and realize what's happening. Hey, look, the last BI solution isn't working. People aren't doing spreadsheets. And the answer was, let's do a new one. But you know, you're doomed to repeat that cycle forever. It's like an endless roller coaster. So how do you get out of that? How do you break out of that cycle? Well, what if there was a tool that was the best of both worlds, that offered both low cost and sustained agility and scalability? Well, Power BI holds that promise. Let's see how we can make that happen. Firstly, let me clarify the term Power BI. Now, it can mean one of two things depending on who's talking and what's the context. One, it can refer to the Power Star toolset. So all of these tools, Power Pivot, Power Query, Power View, Power Map, and they work within Excel and outside of it. They have these different variants, right? But this Power BI family, it can refer to that. However, these days, when you hear Microsoft talking about Power BI, they are often talking about something very specific. They're talking about PowerBI.com. That's BI in the cloud, software as a service, and which is great, which is terrific. I think it's going to take over the world. However, when we are going to be talking about Power BI, we mean the first one, the Power BI family, the tool set. And PowerBI.com is one way to leverage that, but that's not the only way. There are many other ways, both cloud, online, or on premises, and so forth. We'll talk about those. So when I say Power BI, I mean the Power BI family. And if I want to talk about the cloud service, I'll say PowerBI.com. So let's go ahead and say hello to the family. I wouldn't blame you if you would have been a little confused with all the word soup. Frankly, even I, after the end of a 2-day teaching class, I'm stumbling over all these power terms and so forth. Well, I'll make it simple for you. At least as far as we're concerned, Power Pivot is the center of the universe. It's a central engine that powers all of your BI solution. But what does an engine need? An engine needs fuel. And in this case, the fuel is your data, your business data, any and all of it, big or small, 100 rows or 100 million rows, coming from a database or plain Excel file or text file or online data feed, doesn't matter. Power Pivot can usually connect directly to each of these data sources. However, sometimes it needs a little bit of help, because sometimes before you bring in data to your data model, you might just need to clean it, shape it, transform it in some way. And there's a tool built specifically for that, and that's Power Query. It's Power BI cousin. Right, so as far as we're concerned, Power Query is a great way to bring data into the Power Pivot data model. Right? But again, all roads lead to Rome. It all ends up in your data model. It's going to be all powerful, or pretty cool at least. But what then? Well, it's no good if you can't get it out some way. But yeah, the great thing is you have multiple options when it comes to visualization. Right? You have you have Power View, but that's just one option. When you have Power View within Excel, you have Power View in SharePoint, and then of course just plain old Excel. That works great. You can leverage all the skills, the charting and plotting and conditional formatting skills you learned in Excel, and build beautiful dashboards powered by your Power Pivot data model. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. That's still great. You can go to PowerBI.com, and that they have reports and dashboards and all this new stuff, and that's great. And it doesn't end there. There are plenty of other options. There's SQL Server reporting services. There's Data Zen coming around the block, which Microsoft just acquired. You might have heard about that. And there are other both Microsoft and non-Microsoft options. Right? So you have plenty of options when it comes to visualization. So you can leverage your data model, becomes a single source of truth, and powers these visualizations, these reports across these different tools, and of course across different subsets of audience, right? You can have different set of reports for your sales team, for your product team, for your executive team, and so forth. Now in the past, our webinars have been very hands-on. We've done a walkthrough, we've done a demo, for this one, we're going to stay a little bit high level, but I didn't want you to miss out on the goodness, and especially if some of the folks may not have ever seen these tools, may just have heard some buzzwords. So we have on our YouTube channel, if you follow the first link, bpvt.pro, BBIYT demo, they'll show you a demo of at least 3 of the main tools: Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View. You can of course check out the other channels, other videos on our channel as well. Right? Maybe Andrea, you can type this in the chat window.
You bet.
We'll probably. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll probably also send you guys a follow-up email with some of this information. Now, all the stuff that I showed here, it's possible you can do just everything in Excel. Use Power Query as an Excel add-in, use Power Pivot within Excel, and use Excel as your visualization engine, right? So you can do everything in Excel. However, at some point, you're going to run into a wall, right? So let's talk about this analogy. It's YouTube for data. Well, if you think about video sharing, right? If you think back to the 90s or something, right? Video sharing used to be really hard. And then YouTube just made it super easy. And since then, videos have exploded. If you think about that, if you think about sharing your workbooks, they shared some of the same challenges. When you start sharing your awesome Power Pivot workbook, it has everything in it. It's got reports. Maybe it's got Power View built in as well. But then you're worried, oh man, how do I send this large file? Right? Even if it's 3 meg, it's kind of big, right? And of course, pretty soon it might grow to 20 and 50 and 100 meg, who knows, right? And even if somehow you made it through, then, hey, do they have the right software? Do they have the right version? Do you have the plugin installed? All of this worry you have to go through. And really, if you think about the new modes of consumption, it's any device, and it's certainly web. So web and mobile, I mean, you have to make those work. So unless you enable that, all that awesomeness in your data model is kind of trapped. So what you really need is YouTube for your workbook, or in general, YouTube for data. And my friend, you are in luck, because you don't have just one option, but you have many. Right. So first of all, there's PowerBI.com. Gosh, that's where Microsoft is pouring all their energy, and I think it's going to be great. And I'll admit I have some reservations about it. It's a little rough around the edges, but look at what has happened in the industry. I mean, Salesforce, right? It's just taken over everything, right? So I believe that PowerBI.com is going to be the juggernaut, right? So all eyes should be on that. But you have other options as well. SharePoint, you can go with SharePoint Online. That gives you some visualization options. Or you can have SharePoint on-premises. You can go with third-party options there as well. And then there is SSAS Tabular. I have a soft spot for that. If you go on our site, powerpivotpro.com, you would notice that I have a few blog posts on SSAS Tabular. That's an option in itself. It enables that server, that YouTube for data. And the cool thing about SSAS Tabular is that it also works with SharePoint and PowerBI.com. Both of those can connect to a data model which is hosted in SSAS Tabular. And then you have other options. I mean, data isn't being one, but so you can always explore other options there. But these are the main ones here. Now, of course, this is often a bit too much for somebody who's just starting out in this, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't figure it out. Where do I look? Where do I start? Right? Well, for one, as we said, your data model is the center of the universe. So that is a central point you would start. However, sometimes I think of this in a slightly different way, in these 3 buckets. And I would encourage you maybe think in the similar manner. So instead of trying to figure out these tools and exactly which tool to use, just think about, hey, I'm going to author my model, right? I might want to host it on a server, and then I would need to build some reports off of that. And then you have multiple options within those buckets. Really, it doesn't matter that much which one you choose, as long as you pick one and you move forward with it. Right? Now, of course, you notice here that Excel is the common denominator. And hey, gosh, I mean, it's reported Excel apparently has close to 750 million users worldwide. So it's a good chance you already have that. Excel 2010 or 2013 both work with Power Pivot. So that's a great starting point. Right? Now, outside of that, it's hard for me to give some generic advice that, oh yeah, these ones are the best options for you. It often is very specific to the conditions that you have in your organizations, whatever constraints you have, the software you have already have available, what's on your roadmap, and so forth. So it's hard for me to give generic advice. I'll say think of this in these three buckets: authoring, server and hosting, and reports. However, if you do have questions around your specific scenario, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A in the end, so I'll be happy to answer any of your specific questions around this. Now, as amazing as these tools are, though, I still believe that people and process come before tools, right? I mean, these can't succeed without that. In fact, all these tools are doing are enabling and empowering the people in your organization, right? In my mind, the best BI tool is the one that gets out of your damn way, right? Because mostly, what are you doing with BI? You're just struggling with these tools. But imagine if the tools became transparent and now you're focusing on your business. Then you people can do what you're really hired to do them, hopefully grow your business. So this is what typical BI projects look like. They may not start that way, but somehow, scope creep and all that, and they're trying to do a whole bunch of plumbing here and there, and they're trying to cater to everything. Well, that's not the new approach. That's not the approach you want to take with these Power BI tools. The approach that I would recommend is the Trojan horse approach, right? Send in a shock team, capture a small part, and thereon, it's going to spread like wildfire, right? But start small. So start with a pilot project. Now it has to be something small, something you can chew on, bite-sized, but meaningful. Right? And often you can pick projects which would have been incredibly hard before Power BI, but with these new set of tools, it's easy. Right? And we often drop into these jump starts where we go to different organizations and we just spend 3 to 5 days. And by the end of it, we have often built something which just they couldn't build it with their traditional BI systems in 6 months or more. Some things have just never been done because they were that hard. And with these new tools, you can burn through that in 3 to 5 days. So yeah, these are amazing tools, but start with something small but meaningful, and definitely go end to end. By that I mean connect to your data, build your data model, and get some end reports which are meaningful, which are useful to the end users, right? So rather than trying to put everything in your data model and then moving on to reporting, go end to end for a small project. So hopefully you will do that, and that'll be super successful. I mean, typically, that is, people look at that and they go, whoa, right? And you tell them that, oh yeah, it took me 5 days to build this, or something like that. But where do you go from there? Now, Power BI is agile BI, so it's not those 6 months development life cycles, waterfall. All of that is gone, right? So think agile development. Think quick iterative cycles. So we use the engine and the fuel analogy, right? So in a way, you're going to keep beefing up your engine. You're going to keep adding more fuel to it, more data sets. So I was at Microsoft Learning, and we had 4 lines of business. So we started with 1, courseware, but then we added another, certification exams, then we added press, then we added e-learning, right? So you just keep growing, and your model becomes smarter and smarter. So that's kind of on the back end. But on the front end, keep iterating with your users. Keep sitting down with them, having conversations with them, collaborating with them. That is key, right? Now, in my mind, a successful report is not something which you ship and you never hear back. One of the reports that was dear to my heart back in Microsoft Learning was this report for sales team we had done around courseware, where even after a year, they kept coming back to me saying, hey, Avi, this is great. Oh, man, this is so phenomenal. I love it. It's working great. But, right, and I love that but, because they always had something more. And that meant to me that they're really using it, because that's the nature of BI. You keep pushing the edge. So expect that, and you know, and these tools certainly enable you to have that quick turnaround, have that agility. I'll talk about one other dynamic which I've often seen, even at Microsoft and some of the other organizations that I've visited, is this wall between IT and business user. And IT grew up sometimes at different names, but you know what I'm talking about. And it almost sometimes feels like they're on the opposite sides of the fence, and it's not how it should be. Really, there shouldn't be a line, right? Both of these users should have the same goal, and that is to help the business. And I think it's high time, with the use of these new tools, to start building BI which works for the business, not BI for BI's sake. Right? I've seen plenty of BI projects which end up building these ivory towers who serve nobody, certainly not the business. All right, so let's see what we covered. We talked about why we'll use Power BI. We clarified just the term of Power BI, what that means. We looked at the Power BI family. We talked about how at some point you're going to need YouTube for data. You're going to need a server or hosting option. And lastly, people and process are still important, right? And you might want to take a slightly different approach to this new wave of BI. Think agile, iterative development. Right. Now with all of this, you have help. On our blog, there are close to 800 posts. Certainly scour that. We'll keep running webinars on similar, same topic or different. Maybe we'll revisit the topics we've done in the past. So you're more than welcome to join for the new topics, or recommend it to your teammates, recommend it to your friends. And there are a plethora of other training options available. We've got a whole range of them based on whatever your learning style is. And then on the consulting side, you can have kind of expert help just on an hourly basis, jump starts, 3 to 5 days that I talked about, or something long-term, something longer-term engagement. If you have any questions about that, drop an email to empower@powerpivotpro.com, or go check out our website at powerpivotpro.com. All right, guys, gosh, I burned through that a little faster than I expected, but that's great. That means we're going to have time for Q&A.
All
right, Andrew, so how's the crowd been? Yep,
we've gotten a few questions coming in. I can just kind of go down the list if you want. The first question that we got was about what some cloud service options are for sharing Power View and Power Pivot reports without investing per se in the SharePoint server.
Oh, great. Let's go to that slide. So we will make sure you all get these slides or notes at least. So cloud sharing, certainly the vanguard of that is PowerBI.com. That's where all eyes should be. Gosh, it's amazing the rate at which they are evolving. I mean, they I think have a monthly release cycle and so forth. So PowerBI.com is the first option that I would look at. If that option is somehow not available to you, mostly the concern that is cited is security. I'll come back and talk about that a little bit. But if PowerBI.com somehow doesn't work for you, then SharePoint, but man, SharePoint, you can go with SharePoint Online. So just search for that, SharePoint Online. That's more like PowerBI.com. That's a cloud service. You can sign up for that. And you don't get everything, but you can host Excel, Power Pivot workbooks online, and you can use that as visualization. That will render in a browser. It doesn't have some of the bells and whistles like that other options might have. And the other option is third-party, which is kind of like on-premises, except you let somebody else do it. And we use one of those guys. We actually use portalfront.com. We've been happy with them so far. So yeah, you can just search for SharePoint Online. That's by Microsoft, or check out Portalfront or other similar services. But really, I would look at, first of all, PowerBI.com. Make sure that's an option for you. So I mentioned something, I said security, and I said I'll come back to that. So often when I say PowerBI.com, people say, oh my gosh, is it safe to put my data up there? And those concerns are genuine, and they need to be weighed within your organization. Whoever, if you have a security expert, they need to weigh in on that. But I would say that I'm sure when Salesforce came along, people had the same concerns, and they don't have any more. I mean, Salesforce has pretty sensitive data as well, your clients and so forth, and a lot of organizations are using that. So think that way. I think that's the future. And I'll also say, if you look at all the credit card breaches and all that happens, if you look at the data, now most of them have an insider associated with the security breach, right? So you have to think about how secure are your internal systems, and sometimes these cloud systems are even more secure because they have to be, right? They have more auditing, more security, more layers around them, right? So I'm not a security expert, but I just want to kind of shake that a bit and shake that argument that oh, we're not going to the cloud because it's not secure, right? All right, so hopefully that answered that. What else do we have, Andrew? And maybe I'll...
Thanks, Bobby. We have a lot of interest in DataZen, and a lot of attendees wanted to know if you could talk more about DataZen and where you might use it over Power BI and maybe how it complements Cloud.
Oh my gosh, yes. So DataZen, that one is so dear to heart. So that one has been the most popular post ever on our site. Gosh, it spread like wildfire. We were surprised. We were surprised by the interest in it. So let's talk about DataZen. So certainly I would say read the article about DataZen on our site. And hey, as I said, close to 800 blog posts. So pretty much any topic you can think of. The search box is your friend. Go in the search box and type that in. So I'll pull up the DataZen post. So of course I had the same concerns, questions in my mind when this announcement came out. And hey, what does it mean? How does it fit in? What's the direction? So this is my best understanding so far from some of the public announcements that have been made, right? So PowerBI.com already has an app, a mobile app. So if you go to PowerBI.com and mobile app, you'll see it right here. For mobile warriors, they have for Windows and Apple. Android is coming soon. So they have that. But then why DataZen? Because if you look at DataZen, they seem to be all about mobile. Now this is my best understanding. Again, I don't work for Microsoft, so I can't speak for them. But I think what's going on is that, again, some people have concerns about Power BI. So they're not sure they want to move to the cloud, but they do want mobile, right? So if you don't want to move to the cloud and you do want mobile, then you can go with DataZen, right? So I think this is an on-premises server which is available for free for anybody who has SQL Server Enterprise, right? But man, that's heavy lifting. So my background is as an Excel user. Gosh, so SQL Server Enterprise license, I don't know how many Excel users would have that, or their IT teams would have that. And yeah, so that gets a little tricky. So it's not for kind of more for the Excel crowd, but if you're an IT team and you already have SQL Server Enterprise, it's a great option to look at, primarily because it's going to be free for you. Right? So DataZen, just set up the server, and that is going to give you the mobile option on tablets, on phone, and it looks very beautiful. Right? Now, of course, my other set of concern was, how does it work with Power Pivot? Unfortunately, it doesn't click in as neatly as some of the other options that I talked about. So let's go back to that one. So we talked about how it has many visualization options, but all of these fit in, and they really, if you've done pivot tables in Excel, most of these access the cube in that manner. You get a field list, and you can just check boxes, drag and drop, very, very easy. DataZen, unfortunately, my understanding is that it doesn't have that interface. You can connect it. The connection is slightly hiccupy. You can either kind of export your Power Pivot goodness to a table and then pull that in DataZen, or for that table, you can use a DAX query, which not easy to build. But yeah, so that connection is a little bit tricky from Power Pivot, but can be done. And in general, I'm thinking of this as mobile for the folks who are not on Power BI. I hope that answers that somewhat. I did want to go back to that cloud question. And yeah, so there's SharePoint Online, which gives you some capabilities, and then there's Power BI. So that I'm going back to the previous questions about the cloud options. All right, what else do we have?
All right, the next question kind of centers around what options there are for data refresh. People have heard of Power Update and refresh ability on SharePoint. Can you talk about some of those options?
Yep, absolutely. So we use this YouTube analogy, YouTube for workbooks, and I mostly weighed in on the ease of sharing, right? That people can consume it in web or mobile. But of course, one issue that you do not have with your YouTube videos is refreshing them, right? You know, you just post what you post and then you share. Well, for data, it's something different. So here, the server option, this YouTube option, is even more powerful because it lets you, you know, set up automatic refresh, and of course, depending on the option you go with, it can let you other fancier things like security, row-level security, and whatnot, right? So these server options are really, really valuable. Believe me, when you haven't discovered auto refresh, or not used to it, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, you think, you know, it's just a weekly report. I'll just hit refresh and it'll be okay. But when you go to automatic refresh, it just changes your life. I loved responding to people when they said, I would show them a Power report on a SharePoint site and say, oh yeah, this looks fabulous. Now, how often does it refresh? Or they would ask me, oh, can you send me an updated copy? And I'll say, that copy is always up to date, right? It's always up to date. I loved giving that answer. So you want to get to that point. So your options are going to depend on your server route, your YouTube route. If you go with PowerBI.com, then one choice can be that you're only using cloud sources. You know, you're only pulling in data from Salesforce and MailChimp and all the connectors that they have online, right? Then that should work right out of the box. However, I doubt that would be the case for anybody. You know, most likely you would have at least one or a few on-premises resources. For that, you need to set up a data management gateway, right? So for this one, you know, you need a data management gateway. Well, I can type the whole thing, right? But if you go on PowerBI.com, let's toggle back there, and you click on Downloads. Yeah, you would see down in this area, well, actually it has a connector. You might have to search for Data Management Gateway. See all downloads? Let's see what that does. No way. So you need a Data Management Gateway. What that does is it lets the cloud come down and connect to your on-premises data sources. I will say, though, that in my experience, that's been tricky. That's been tricky to set up, and inevitably something will fail. If you check Power BI forums, it's littered with people seeking help that, hey, their on-premises refresh didn't work right. Let me come back to that what's could be a good way to solve that. SharePoint Online, I'm not sure it has any refresh options. Gosh, I'm not sure how that would work. On-premises, though, definitely has refresh. That's what we used in Microsoft when I was working there. And this is on-premises, so this doesn't have some of the challenges that PowerBI.com has because it's on-premises, so yep, you can supply any credentials to connect to your local data sources. And SSAS Tabular is also on-premises, so again, you can specify any credentials. And for this one, if you are using SQL Server Analysis Services Tabular, you would be using a SQL Server agent to schedule a job to refresh these, right? So you have all of these options, but then you have one more. You have something that kind of encompasses all of these, which is Power Update. And Power Update is different because it's really takes over the role of a human. It actually, in one of the earlier releases, it did use to open up Excel and really virtually click the data refresh all button. That's what it was doing. The new release no longer, it does it in the background, so it doesn't really, you wouldn't see it launching Excel, but that's what it's doing. Imagine you worked on your model on your desktop. So let me say, actually let me just show you. So I have let's go training. Oh, sorry. So I have desktop, class, and let's say I had this file with my Power Pivot model in it, right? And with Power Update, I could schedule to refresh this, and then you can also choose the target. You can send this, upload this to a SharePoint server, you can upload it to even PowerBI.com, the paid service, you can upload it to SharePoint list, and then it has a whole bunch of bells and whistles. You can update everything in a folder, you can point that to a SharePoint folder which you update, and so on and so forth. The best part is that it's free. Well, at least it has a free version. It's free to try with all functionality. I think the free version is just limited to one workbook, but you can try the heck out of that. And hey, if you really want to do that, you can have one instance running on multiple machines, and you can refresh multiple workbooks. So yeah, it doesn't take much to try. Go ahead and download, play with it, and I think it just adds a good complement to all of these options. And of course, it's possible that if all you're looking for is refresh, then you don't have to go with any of these. You just have your Excel file, use Power Update to refresh it, and that's it, you're good. Now of course you're going to lose out on some of this YouTube goodness that I talked about, but at least you'll get the refresh. Okay, hopefully that helped with that. Certainly if there's any follow-up, type it in. We'll come back to that. So Andrew, do you have other questions?
Yeah, could you talk more about SSAS Tabular and just kind of more specifics about what it is and how it fits in, and maybe where you'd use it versus Power Pivot?
Yep, so I'll point to our beautiful website, and you can say SSAS Tabular. So SSAS Tabular and Power Pivot are really the same technology. It's, so Power Pivot, I mean, it wasn't built by the Office team, it wasn't built by the Excel team, this was built by the SQL team, right? So it's coming from there, and it's really the same thing under the hood. So think in Excel, when you have Power Pivot, what's going on here? You have the same engine, you have the SQL Server Analysis Services engine running. The only catch is that one is kind of dedicated to Excel, right? But then you go kind of the bigger version of that, same thing, but now you go SSAS Tabular, and now it's a server. So now it can connect to a whole bunch of different things. So if you go back to our site, let's say, come on. All right, so okay. So when I said here, when I said Power Pivot, this could be an Excel Power Pivot file, or this could be SSAS Tabular. Right? They're both the same technology, right? But while Excel, it's yeah, I mean, unless you go with one of the YouTube options, you can't directly connect it to that. If you don't go with any of the YouTube options, you can just connect it to your Excel file. That's it. You can have the model and you can have your reports in it. But once you move it up to SSAS Tabular, and doing that is really, really easy. I'll point to some of the web posts, blog posts that we have about that. Then now this is sitting in SSAS Tabular. So this guy is SSAS Tabular, and then you can build Power BI reports on it online. You can have connected Excel files connected back to the data model, and these can be reports or just pivots, something simple. You can also connect powerbi.com to your SSAS Tabular on-premises server, and so on and so forth, right? So it gives you that YouTube-ish options. Let me go back to here, and I want to point out to, so here's the option that lets you connect your powerbi.com instance to your on-premises SSAS Tabular server, right? So again, it gives you that option. Now the beauty of SSAS Tabular is that I found it very approachable. Again, I come from an Excel background, had some SQL, but really not an IT guru by any means. Wouldn't touch SharePoint installation by a, I wouldn't come close to that. But SSAS Tabular, you would find a post where I show that I set it up, installed it, and had it up and running in less than 30 minutes. Right? It's a great option, fairly easy to configure and use. So that's one, and then we have a whole bunch of posts here. And going from Excel Power Pivot to SSAS Tabular Power Pivot is really, really easy. You actually you can just right-click and upload an Excel file on there. All right, so I wouldn't get you lost here. Just search for SSAS Tabular on our site, and you'd find some very good posts which give you more detail. So kind of a good option. The only catch is that it's on premises. So yeah, and it by itself doesn't give you any of the web and mobile options. For that, you would have to have SharePoint or Power BI and have those connecting back to your SSAS Tabular model. And it's also more robust, more scalable. I mean, we have a client of ours who's running a 1 terabyte model in SSAS Tabular. I mean, Excel, you can't quite do that, So, so a lot more scalable. It has other bells and whistles. It has partitions, so you don't refresh. If you have a 100 million row table, you don't have to refresh all of it. You can partition it so you only get the latest data and so forth. And then it has rollable security and things like that. So a pretty cool option, but on premises and might need some help from IT. Okay, what else do we have?
There was some confusion around Office 365 and how it relates to Power BI and some of the differences between Power BI V1 and V2 and just where things look to be going. Could you talk about some of that?
Yeah, and if you think about the stock market, often stocks don't go up or down by good news or bad news. Oh, let me find this article. Yeah, so coming back to the stock options, sometimes what can be most hurtful for a stock is confusion or lack of clarity around what things is. A lot of times market can absorb bad news really well. And people say, you know what, this quarter is not going to be profitable, right? You give them this forecast and because of A, B, and C, but you know what, after that we're going to making these changes. So market says, oh, okay, fine, great, right? We love you still, right? And I think it's the same dynamic with Power BI. Man, I think it's getting killed because of this confusion, this miasma around it, and people don't quite get it. I don't know what's going on, this V1, V2. So that's unfortunate. My only hope is it just goes away really quick. Hopefully V2 gets out of preview and there's only one. So here's the story we have so far. So again, search box is a great site. So YouTube, I searched for that. And this is our last article on this topic, and here's what's going on. So right now, as a paid option, we have Power BI V1, right? So you pay $9.99, and it works the way it works, right? But I wouldn't focus too much on that because really the future is the V2, right? And the V2 free is the only thing that's available right now. But once it's out of preview and it hits general availability, then V2 Pro, you would have that. And at that point, Power BI V1 would go away. V2 is going to have everything you have in V1 and more, really, more, oh my gosh, really cool stuff, right? So V1 will be gone, right? So here's where I'm focusing. So V2 free is great, right? Can't beat the price. I think it's very generous. Some of the limits they have around V2, like 1 gigabyte per user. Man, I mean, with the compression that you can get with Power Pivot, it's crazy. I mean, I think a small organization of 100 to 500 users might be able to get by on free as far as that constraint is there, right? But then the Pro is going to have some additional features around team collaboration and so forth, which may also be valuable, right? So let's say, so they asked about Office 365. Yeah, so that's what's happening in this realm. And V2, the biggest change around V2 is really, you know, breaking its chains. So V1 had this tie-up with kind of SharePoint and Office 365, but V2 is going to be a standalone service. It's not going to require SharePoint or Office 365. You just sign up for PowerBI.com and boom, you get all of that functionality. Having said that, if you are an Office 365, you know, OneDrive for Business or a SharePoint Online customer, then you would be able to use them together. Frankly, I'll admit I'm not 100% clear what that means. We'll see when that comes, when the GA comes. But some of it may be being able to store larger files and things like that. SharePoint Online may allow that. But really, the way I would think of that is that V2 is going to be a standalone service. You pay for that, it's BI in a box, right? You get pretty much everything you would need to do BI in the cloud. All right, hopefully that answered. Again, you know, feel free to pipe in a comment or a follow-up question if you have any. All right, Andrew?
We have another question that's been coming up a few times about how you can share your data model among team members. And I thought maybe you could go into detail about the core and then methodology that can be used with SharePoint.
Yeah, so, oh gosh. So they're talking about the data model itself, not visualizations, right? Yeah, so ideally you want this to be, single source of truth. Well, I don't know what I did. You want this to be a single source of truth, so you're going to have your data model and ideally one data model, and that powers all of these reports, tons of reports. You can build hundreds of reports on this one single data model, right? And that's what we strived for when I was at Microsoft Learning, right? But that's often a balance, right? I mean, that going with one data model means that you're limiting it in some ways, that other people who want to just tweak one thing or add one thing, you know, how do they do that? And I think that picture isn't quite clear with Power Pivot. They haven't made it really easy for multiple people to develop and collaborate, right? So yeah, I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. I will tell you what I would like to see. I would like to see kind of this one data model, which is maintained by whoever is, you know, a very, very small group of users, right? But then imagine if you hosted that model up on SSAS Tabular or SharePoint or PowerBI.com, right? And somebody else could come in and say, hey, this is great, but I just want to pull in this one mapping table or something else, add it to this data model, and then add my one new measure, or just add a new measure. So I want to take that model and just augment it. And there's no good way to do that. I mean, short of, you know, either copying the whole data model or extracting data from it. So unfortunately, what I've seen is that model development is often very serial. If you're sticking with one data model, that's one route. So you can have one person in there at a time. Like, two people can't be there because it's impossible to merge changes. That is not doable. That's one route. Another route is that you have multiple copies, right? So you get multiple copies, and you know, maybe this person copies this and makes some changes, and then they copy this again, and maybe this guy makes a copy of that. And you can do that. Gives you more flexibility than having a single model, but of course that can become really confusing. So yeah, unfortunately that's the state of things. I think the closest hope might be Visual Studio. So if you're using SSAS Tabular and instead of Excel you have Visual Studio as your authoring environment, they don't have it yet, but that is kind of the hardcore development platform where I would expect they would bring in functionality where it's going to be easier to share a data model, it's going to be easier to collaborate and so forth. Sorry, I'm looking for that slide. Okay, so yeah, probably not, you know, not a solution, but that's the best I have on that one right now.
Great. And then we just kind of got a few people that are new to Power BI, new to Power Pivot, asking where they should start and what recommendations you could give around that.
All right, yeah, absolutely. So I talked about how Power Pivot is the center of the universe, right? It really is. You know, that's where you want to pull in all your data. That's what's going to power all your reporting and BI solution. And I liked how somebody put it at a SQL Pass conference last year. So somebody asked the exact same question, like, where do I start? And they said, Power Pivot is the gateway drug of BI, right? So I think that's certainly true. So that's a good place to start, but then you can, you can of course branch out to other things. I'll tell you the resources that we have. Again, blog, I mean, close to 800 articles. Go scour through that. It's got lots of good stuff in there. Hopefully this webinar helped. The cheapest option would be book on our site, and that's $10 for the digital edition. And yeah, it's going to be the best $10 you've ever spent, right? So on our site, just click on this book link, and that's the cheapest option. And then we have other paid options. If we can get back to that. We have a course coming up next week. We have a recorded course. We also do live courses. We also do on-site training. So if you're a group of people, maybe 5, maybe 20, something like that, we can help you train. We did have discount codes for 2 of these options: the online live course coming up next week and a recorded course. So feel free to leverage that. And hey, just depends on your style of learning. We have a YouTube channel. It's got some videos there. There's tons of videos on YouTube. Yeah, so leverage any one of those. Start with Power Pivot, but then follow your interest. If you're more interested in visualization, you're going to lean more towards PowerBI.com and Power View. Or if you're more interested in the back end, you might lean more towards Power Query. Okay, hope that helps.
And then one last thing, just in the interest of time, could you share the links again? I didn't quite get those down. The report examples on our site.
For the YouTube one, right?
Yep.
The demo? Yep, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
PBI, yeah, Power BI, YT demo. All right, any stragglers? Any other questions?
I think that pretty much covers the general themes. There's some, in-depth questions.
Okay. All right. So Andrew, I know you're a busy man. I'll let you go. I'll hang back,
Right.
maybe go through the question list and see if other folks have any questions.